I have a challenge for you. I'm gonna show you two different creatures in their natural habitat, and you have to guess which one is the Falmer. One.
I made it through the wilderness. Somehow I made it through it.
And two. Hey guys, it's Time Bomb, and today we're going to be discussing the origins of the Falmer. Now, some of you may not know, the Falmer are actually a blind, corrupted, and twisted version of who they once were. And being such horrifying creatures, they've earned themselves nicknames such as Snow Ghost, Boggles, Fish People, and Clattercoats. This information came from a book in the ESO Greymore DLC called Monsters of Northern Folklore, and the main gist of this book details how the Falmer have over the years been found stealing livestock, stabbing wandering merchants in their sleep, and spoiling root cellars with poisonous slime. And all of this obviously led to the Nords having an extreme and still growing hatred for them. But the Falmer actually weren't always like this. They were once a strong society that fought to the bloody end for freedom. So how did they become these goblin-like creatures we know today? If you've ever played the Dawnguard DLC, it sheds a little bit of light on this topic throughout the questline, but it's kind of a blink and you'll miss it type thing with everything else going on. A quick glance at some parts of the Forgotten Vale can make a testament to how advanced the Snow Elves once were. With what remains of their beautiful cathedral-like buildings that they left behind, we know there's much more to what they were than the bottom-feeding creatures that now dwell in the deepest caverns of Skyrim. Hi, I'm currently editing this video, and I realize there's some stuff that I left out that I feel like is kind of worth mentioning, so I thought I'd just throw it in real quick. Back in the olden days of Skyrim, before the Dawnguard DLC came out, which gave us the Forgotten Vale that's littered with all kinds of relics that the Snow Elves had built, and also introduced us to Night Paladin Gelibor, who is one of the last known Snow Elves in existence. The only other evidence we could actually find in vanilla Skyrim of the Snow Elves ever being anything but the Falmer is actually the statue in Erkenthans that Mercer steals the eyes out of at the end of the Thieves Guild questline. And I remember this being really confusing to me because we're told we have to stop him from stealing the eyes of the Falmer, and when we get there, he's standing on a statue that actually doesn't look like Marceline from Adventure Time when she turns into a bat like we would expect, because, you know, that's what the Falmer looks like. Who's this pretty motherfucker? And in addition to that, I will say there was a little more lore I could have covered in this video, but I more so wanted to focus on the exact point that started the downfall of the Snow Elves and turned them into the Falmer we know today. All right, so I'm done here. This story is pretty interesting, so buckle up and we're gonna get back to the actual video now. And unfortunately, we don't really know anything about their origins as Snow Elves, but we have a definitive retelling of the battle that began their transformation into the modern Falmer. And for that, it's time to retell the story of the Battle of Moesring, which was transcribed in a book called The Fall of the Snow Prince by Lokheim. Now, with this story I'm about to tell you, there's not much for pictures or anything to actually show you the events of this battle, because none of it actually took place in any games. I also have not yet been able to find any concept art or anything to help with this story, so I'm actually going to be telling you this story in a graphic audiobook kind of way with sound effects and background footage. Hi, Editor Time Bomb here again with more tragic news. In my search for sound effects that won't get me copyright stricken, I looked at several different websites, and I don't know what's wrong with the sound effect business, but when I got to the pricing of these different websites, they basically asked for everything except spreading my fucking cheeks for them. I mean, they're sound effects. I'm not Elon Musk, okay? I'm a starving artist. So my solution to this problem was just grabbing a bunch of random shit from the kitchen and just seeing if we can make some believable war sounds with these. I'll also flash some footage of me making these sounds as they appear in the video. It's definitely going to break the immersion for the storytelling, but we like to keep things goofy here anyway, so fuck it. And hopefully this is the final setback for this video, because if it's not, I'm gonna make a dying sound effect next, and it's gonna be pretty realistic. Just kidding. Enjoy the story. And sorry to clickbait you, but you're not getting any Subway Surfers like you did in the intro of this video. Only lore addicts beyond this point, ladies and gentlemen. Now sit back, relax, grab a snack, and prepare for a battle that took place upon this very same mountain that you can visit in Solstheim. At the start of this great battle between the Nords and the Snow Elves, the Elven soldiers immediately struck fear into the hearts of Iskramor's men. This was because the call of the Elven soldiers was not one of anger or fear, but of joy, as the book states. The kind of joy felt by a damned man who had been granted a second chance at life. Because at the time of this battle, the Snow Elves were at their final horizon. Iskramor's army had marched marched right up to their native land in the Moesring Mountains of Solstheim, and they were prepared to finally wipe the elves off the face of Nirn. And the elves were well aware of this, so what's left to do but make their final stand? But the cries of joy they shouted had more significance than most of Ysgramor's army was aware of, as among his ranks of soldiers there were very few scholars and chroniclers who knew the language we now know to be ancient Falmer. And these men and women shuddered at the significance of the words these elven soldiers were shouting in the midst of battle. The Snow Prince has come. Doom is at hand. With these words, silence fell across the bloodied battlefield, and through the remaining ranks of the elves, the Snow Prince had made his appearance. His magnificent white horse had made its way to the front line and paced in front of the final elves at an almost ghost-like pace. The book then shifts to the perspective of the Nords. A Nord warrior will spend much of his life seeing bloodshed and battle, and not too far into his later years had he likely seen everything war had to offer. But the way this once raging battlefield fell silent with the arrival of the awe-inspiring Snow Prince was a spectacle that no Nord warrior on that battlefield had ever before experienced. And with the emergence of the Snow Prince came a death-like silence among the battlefield, and in this silence there was an understanding made among the Nords and elves alike. What happened on that day, on that mountain, had no matter in the greater picture, victory or defeat. The one truth that was silently agreed upon by both parties was that death would come to many on this day, for the victor and the vanquished. The glorious Snow Prince with his spear and armor that bore a radiant glow of unknown magicka had come to bring death to the Nords, victory or defeat. And death is what he delivered. Suddenly a violent snow with a force that could tear down the mightiest halls swept through the battlefield as the Snow Prince began his slaughter upon Ysgramor's army. As the blizzard dances in tune to his rampage, wrapping itself around him, showing the army that the blizzard had been called upon by the prince himself. It was during this slaughter that some ancient Nord heroes had met their fate before the Snow Prince. Ulfki Anvilhand, Strom the White, Freda Oakenwand, and Heimdall the Frenzied. Though there's no known images of these warriors, it is written in history that they had all been sent to Sovngarde on this day. At this point in battle, it felt as if the tide had finally turned, and perhaps Ysgramor and his men would too be sent to Sovngarde. The elves gathered, a fire for victory reignited in their hearts by the Snow Prince. They prepare for their final charge, until suddenly, in an instant, the battle came to an unexpected end. A 12-year-old girl named Fina, who came to battle as a squire to her mother, watched in horror as the Snow Prince slain her only remaining parent. In her rage and anguish, Fina picked up her mother's sword and threw it with all her might at her mother's killer. It was at this point the Snow Prince's spear stopped its deadly dance, and just like that, the battlefield once again fell silent. And every eye turned towards the Snow Prince, who is now sitting upon his steed, with Fina's mother's sword buried in his chest. And the entirety of both armies stood in shock, witnessing the final moments of the Snow Prince. He falls from his horse and lays dead upon the ground, slain by a 12-year-old girl. At this point, the spirit of the remaining elven army had been entirely shattered. Many fled, and those remaining soldiers who stood with valor until the bitter end had too met their fate by the broad axes of the Nords. And when the battlefield fell silent for a final time, all that remained was pure carnage upon the mountains of Moesring. As Ysgramor's army approached the remains of the Snow Prince, they were surprised to see that his spear and armor still shined with the magical glow, even in death. As the history books state, the Nords were baffled with awe for the Snow Prince. And at this point in the story, I was actually quite surprised to hear what the Nords went on to do. It is common practice for the Nords to burn the corpses of their fallen foes as a means of necessity due to the fact that death brings disease and dread. But as the Nords gaze upon the remains of the radiant Snow Prince, reliving the memories of his ferocity in battle and immense love and respect his kin had for him, Ysgramor and all the mighty chieftains agreed that this man of great renown deserved an honorable burial. And so the remains of the Snow Prince were wrapped in fine silks to a freshly dug barrow. His armor and spear were presented on a pedestal, and the tomb was filled with treasures worthy of royalty. It was there that his body would be preserved in the barrow for as long as Nirn would allow it. The only exception to this burial was that the Snow Prince would ironically not be offered the preservative protection of Stalhrim, which was reserved only for the fallen Nords. In case you Skyrim players didn't know, this is also the ice stuff that you make armor out of. Just thought I'd let you know how disrespectful it is every time you try to make a sword out of a Nord hero's preservatives. The Snow Prince is buried with honor, and the Snow Elves are seemingly wiped out. At least on the surface, because after the fall of the Snow Elf civilization, the remaining survivors went into hiding underground, where they found the massive caverns that have come to be known as Blackreach. This is where the Falmer ended up running into the Dwemer who had built Blackreach into a giant metropolis underground. And as the Snow Elves sought refuge with the dwarves having nowhere else to go that they could hide from the Nords, the Dwemer agreed to hide and protect the elves, but this came with a terrible price. The Dwemer did not trust the Snow Elves, and it was agreed that if they wanted to live among the dwarves, the Snow Elves were forced to eat the toxic fungi that grew underground, which in turn permanently blinded them. And this lasted for a while until naturally a rebellion started. Several generations after the first Snow Elves sought refuge with the dwarves and were in turn terribly betrayed, the elves who have now fully become the Falmer we know today overthrew the dwarves and fled even further down to the deepest parts of Blackreach, foreign to even the dwarves. And for decades, the long-fought War of the Crag raged deep underneath Skyrim soil, completely unbeknownst to the Nords who had all but forgotten about the Snow Elves. And this war had battles, heroes, and key moments that will entirely be lost to time and memory, until one day, for an unknown reason, this war came to a sudden end. Because on the final day of this colossal, decades-long underground war, the Falmer marched to bring death and battle to the ancient Dwemer, only to find that their entire race had completely vanished. And all that the dwarves had created had been left to the Falmer to do with as they please. But the decades of warfare had left the Falmer bloodthirsty. And this is what led to modern-day Skyrim, where the Nords are now being tormented by a twisted, bloodthirsty shadow of what the Snow Elves once were. And this is where we come full circle. As mentioned earlier, the Falmer can now be found stealing livestock, stabbing wandering merchants in their sleep, and spoiling root sellers with poisonous slime. And with these new sightings of the Falmer once again on the surface has sparked debate among the Nords whether or not the Falmer are once again trying to reclaim their long-lost glory and stake their claim on land as the second coming of the Snow Elves. So with everything you know now, next time you come face to face with the Falmer, kill them, of course, but just try to remember, this is not the life they wanted. Okay, so the story's over. And now that it is, I just gotta say, I just about shit myself when the story ended up tying in with the vanishing of the Dwemer. And I'm not making any promises, but it's got me pretty hyped to cover what may have happened to them. So keep your eyes peeled. Also, I just thought I'd throw this in here at the end. This isn't even part of the script. While I was doing research, I also read something else that I was kind of having a hard time figuring out where to fit it into this video. Some Nords believe that the Falmer don't have noses because during these battles, Ysgramor cut them off to be able to tell them apart from the rest. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So give me a freedom in the comments so I know you made it this far. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing because it's free and you can always change your mind later. And if you want to further support me, click the join button after subscribing and see if that's of any interest to you. My name's Time Bomb. This has been the origin story of the Falmer, and I will see you guys in the next video.